Hey guys, welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vinosky, your host, and got a really unique thing going on here today. So we've got um, Phillip Raub. He is the CEO of a company called Model Number. They do indoor and outdoor furniture and lighting and things, but they do it from a lens of sustainability and environmentally friendly methods, reusing things, cutting waste, that kind of thing. And one big way they do that is with 3D printing. So we've also got Rahul Kasat. He is here from 3D Systems. They provide Model Number with their 3D printers, and they've partnered up to push the technologies to get what Model Number needs for their business model. So we're going to hear all about that whole interweaving of objectives and technology and just very cool stuff and really neat looking furniture here on Manufacturing Talks. Those guys will be with us in just a half a minute. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vinosky, your host. I think we've got another great show for you today. So we've got Phillip Raub. He is the CEO of a company called Model Number, and Rahul Kasat. He is vice president at 3D Systems. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So we're here to talk about your company, Phillip, which is fascinating to me, and I think everyone out there will find it equally interesting. Before we do that, though, why don't you just tell us a little about yourself, how you got doing what you're doing?
Yeah, we'll do. And yeah, Jim, hopefully we can make this another good chat. Yeah, I think, my background and I think my path to, I think what led me to where I'm at today is a little bit of a long path, maybe not as traditional as most, maybe within the manufacturing sector. I tend to be a builder. I think, my background really, started in kind of in the sales and marketing side of things. Started at Gap in apparel, moved on to video games and kind of the CE space, helping kind of grow and scale, businesses when I was at Nintendo and both at Nest, taking businesses from, whether that was be like couple billion to, 10 billion or, 100, million to like 250 million, and then, kind of myself then moved in and became a little bit more of an entrepreneur and started a retail technology company back in 2015. Kind of scaled that business from zero to about 50 million with 350 people. And then, unfortunately, we were kind of shut down because of COVID and, kind of then moved into the manufacturing sector doing 3D printing where I'm at today.
Yeah, excellent. That's, I love people with that kind of extremely varied background, all kinds of incredibly interesting things. And then Rahul, you're with 3D Systems, and we're going to hear about how you guys play a big role in Phillip's business. But again, before we do, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, great. Well, thanks, Jim, again for having us on your show. I'm Rahul Kasat. I'm vice president at 3D System. I'm responsible for the extrusion 3D printing business that 3D System has. I've been leading that business for about 2.5 years now. The way I joined 3D System is through the acquisition of a small company called Titan Robotics, based out of Colorado Springs, and I was the CEO of that company for about 4.5 years. And then previous to that, I spent about 10 years at DuPont, which is a large chemical company. I'm a chemical engineer by training, so I've been through working for a very large company, Fortune 500 company, to a startup of my own, and then, of course, now working for 3D System, which is a leader in the 3D printing space.
So a couple of guys with very intriguing backgrounds. That's awesome. All right, then, Phillip, tell us, for those out there who don't know, what Model Number is all about.
Yeah, I mean, I think simply put, we 3D print and digitally fabricate furniture using bioresins and plant-based polymers.
And very cool furniture. I'm going
Well,
to add.
thanks. Yeah. I mean, I think, look, yeah, we always look at things, very much rooted in, I think, the design process. I mean, if you don't
Yeah.
have a great and well-designed product, it doesn't matter how cool the process and of the manufacturing and the things that you're doing and you know, sustainable kind of, eco aspect of things. I mean, you ultimately have to have a product that's well designed and something that people, desire and want.
Absolutely right. And, to me, coming from mainstay manufacturing, there's an element to your business story that I think is going to hit home with all of the manufacturers out there. And that is you're focused on reducing waste as well, not just selling really good, really comfortable furniture, but doing it in a very environmentally conscious way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really at the kind of core of kind of what we do and kind of our DNA, that's really kind of um, that component that really I think drives us and drives a lot of the things we do and the way that we do it. And I think, we're very fortunate, obviously, in that we were able to find a partner that and the technology that existed, I think, within the printers that, originally when the company was started, we were building our own 3D printers.
Uh,
And I think we did, an admirable job of doing it, but I mean, it wasn't scalable. I mean, you either have to you kind of have to put your stake in the ground. Like, are you going to be a, manufacturer or builder of, of printers, or are we going to, design great products? And
yeah,
as a small company, I mean, we just didn't have, I think, the bandwidth or the resources to do both. And fortunately, there were companies out there originally, like Titan Robotics, which is now 3D Systems, who had and offered us a product that was better than I think what we had, and the capabilities, and allowed for a lot more consistency. So that
yeah.
allows us, I think, to deliver on the vision that we have, both of great design and great products, but at the same time, to your point, really eliminating a lot of waste, because everything that we do um, is really made to order. But because we can do that on demand now in a way that you probably couldn't have done years ago, and still be able to hit, I think, the timelines that are desired by our customers and clients.
So that brings up a few questions. I've been through your website and seen all the offerings you have out there, and very clearly you're not scrimping on design elements to cut back on materials, cut back on waste. What is the focus when you look at the design itself that kind of takes you in that reduced waste direction?
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, look, we're still, I think, very early stages. If you look at, I think, and Raul probably could maybe comment better on this than I can. I mean, if you look at 3D printing and kind of the evolution of kind of printing and your additive manufacturing, traditionally it's been more component driven, where it's for products that necessarily weren't always consumer facing or weren't necessarily either. It was kind of more behind the scenes, right? It's parts for, whether that's in aviation or in nautical or in certain other areas of automotive.
Yeah.
I think now, I think what we're starting to see is this capabilities to actually bring it more to the forefront in kind of consumer goods. And in
Yeah.
doing so, there's still a lot of, I think, white space, and there's still a lot of, runway, I think, ahead of us as to way that we do that. I think what's where we're at now is, I mean, I kind of almost equate it to, like, if you look at kind of EVs, right, where you're playing in more of an expensive space, and we're kind of getting to a point where we can start to scale and start to kind of bring down cost. But to make 3D printed kind of smaller products and doing it at scale, of doing 20, 30,000 things, pieces or widgets within kind of the furniture sector, is still something that is quite challenging, I think, just because of the material, and I think the capabilities both on the hardware and software side. But we can still offer a very premium, I think, product, and that's what we do today. And I think where we've been successful is having kind of these great designs, understanding still it's a little bit more on kind of high-end residential, as well as on the commercial space in both workplace and hospitality, where we have the customer really understands the value of what they're getting.
Mhm.
And in doing that, what we're doing is we've got a product which we're using either biodegradable or compostable materials. And it has a really kind of unique kind of look and feel to it, and that's where we focus. But I think long term, we're starting to now get into a point where we are scaling what we can do and scaling that output.
Maybe if I can add a few comments there, Jim.
Sure thing.
I think historically, if you looked at 3D printing, and 3D System was one of the pioneers, right, in the area of 3D printing. Chuck Hall invented SLA technology, stereolithography in late 80s, and then that's where the 3D System started. So we're the first ones to do it. And if you look at historically, people have been using 3D printing for prototyping, right? Because you want to make something quickly, touch and feel it, and then make the next decision in your product development or production, right? And that was great. But I think for the last several years, people have been thinking about how can you move 3D printing from just prototyping into production, right? And when you try to bring the cost of the overall parts down, right? Economics has to play an important role if things have to scale up. If they stay expensive, then they're going to be niche products, right? And so I think with the extrusion technology that we have, where let's take model number as an example, right? You're using a cheaper feedstock, which is, pellet-based feedstock. But of course, what Phillip is doing with the biodegradable or the sustainable materials, right? More sustainable materials. He's now able to use the material he wants to use in his products versus something that has been specified by an OEM, right, with the limited choices. And then the printers are also becoming faster. Our printers print really fast. And when you put all those three things together, essentially the cost of the part goes down. And then, of course, if you bring the design element, like what model number is doing with the furniture design, now you are creating unique products that can have limitless opportunities, right, or design. So I think this is where all the things are coming together. And I think we're seeing the next phase for 3D printing, which is really getting into the production. And it could be, 1,000 individual parts, or it could be one part made 1,000 times, right? I think we're now starting to break those boundaries for 3D printing.
Yeah, it's a great point, Rahul. Just look, when I started, I took over the company roughly 4.5 years ago. And in the things that we were doing 4.5 years ago, and the capabilities, whether the software and what we could design and what we could actually pull off, our failure rates, at that time versus what they are today. As you mentioned, kind of, the hardware and the printers and the speed, and then the materials which we're using, right? We can print much faster than we used to be able to print. The prints come off cleaner. In fact, the materials we use one of the materials we use today that's a biodegradable material is acrylic acetate. And in printing with that, and we're one of the only people that I'm aware of globally that's printing the furniture space with this material. When you look at the prints, how clean they come off, it almost looks like it's injection molding. It really feels like that somebody that spent $100,000 to tool this, on the outcome of what we have and what we're able to kind of produce.
Sure. Yeah. And that's a great point. As the technology marches on, it's a better and better fit for your business model. I have to believe too, that 3D printing is a great fit in that with more traditional methods, you're necessarily creating scrap and waste, sawdust and wood scraps and fabric scraps and all that. And you don't have that with 3D printing. So is that an element of what incorporates into your philosophy from a product perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, where we do have kind of wood materials, so we do try to incorporate, I think, just because sometimes, from a consumer perspective, right? I think doing something that's 100% 3D printed, it takes time, right? You have to kind of build that familiarity, right? We're not yet doing kind of 3D printed sofas, because it's not something that necessarily people, you could put pads on them and people, you might get a little bit more comfortable with that. But so that's why we've started in the space of lighting, tables, outdoor seating, things where there's some familiarity, and the product doesn't feel necessarily kind of out of place. But we do add, some wood elements and some upholstered, pieces and to soften them up as well. But when we do, for example, if we use the wood, we do take those scraps. So first of all, we use all SFC certified, woods or salvaged or reclaimed woods. But when we do, we take the sawdust and we can actually mix that back into the polymers, and then it creates kind of a wood print. So this whole idea of this kind of regenerative or recycled, kind of thought process in everything that we do. So I think that's something, really important. But going to, I think, your main point, absolutely, right? I mean, you're really only using what you need. And then if you do have failed prints, you can grind it back down and then use that for prototyping. So the material really is never getting lost or wasted. You're only using exactly what you need.
Now, swinging back to you, Rahul, you mentioned a little bit about the march of 3D printing technology. From where you sit today, what do you think are kind of the big advantages now for that ability to move into production when it comes to 3D printing tech?
Yeah, absolutely right. I think, again, I always think about, being a production guy, what is required for any new technology to be adopted on the production floor, right? And as much as it could be cool and sexy, it still has to meet the part economics, right? And then that's where you start to say, okay, the big part of any production part you make, the material is going to be a big component there, right? So if you can process with the lower cost materials that we do with the Titan 3D printers, that helps a lot, right? Can you print with functional materials? So not only just, ABS or PLA, but as, Philip said, he's printing with cellulose acetates, biodegradable material. We have our aerospace customers printing with carbon fiber Ultems, right? So these are highly functional materials that is going to meet the needs of the end part specification. And then the print speed is of course important, right? Because that's really determining the throughput of the parts you can make out of any machine. So that's your, going back to your usage of the equipment, and then how reliable and repeatable these units are, right? Because if these things are breaking down more than you can actually use them, then nobody's going to use it on the production floor. So I think, and then of course the software capabilities. I mean, there's just a tremendous software capabilities that are coming in terms of tracking of this equipment, making sure if you identify the failure modes and probably take a preventative action before they actually break down, right? So you can get, again, the most out of this equipment. So I think there is a tremendous progress that has happened in the last 10-20 years in terms of hardware, software, materials, and I think that is what is bringing it together. And then of course we need people like Philip, right? I mean, I think he was one of my first customers using Titan printers in the furniture application. And if you would have said that 10 years ago, a lot of people would have said, oh, there is no freaking way you're going to make 3D printer chairs, right? And actually use them out. And these are durable chairs. And this is where, Philip and his team and model number comes in play, because you need those customers who are forward looking. They're always challenging how things are made in a traditional way, and then how can they exploit the benefits of new technology in terms of 3D printing, really the design freedom that you get. And if you can pull all that together, then you create a new business and new application for the new technology. So I think it's great to have a technology, but you really need to find the customers and the partners who are going to work with you to change their workflow in order to adapt it and create new products. So I think the future is bright. I think a lot of things are going to continue to happen. I do think 3D printing will become a mainstream manufacturing technology, but it's not gonna. I also always try to make a point, right? Because then people ask me the next question, which is 3D printing going to change everything? And are you going to start making everything using 3D printing? And I say, no, it's one of the tools in your toolbox, manufacturing toolbox, and you need to figure out where it makes sense. So there's always going to be injection molding, right? If you're making millions of parts, you're going to use injection molding. You will use thermoforming. You will use blow molding. There are other technologies. These are going to coexist with 3D printing, but there are things that you're going to be able to do with 3D printing that you couldn't do before in order to create new products and new value.
Right. Yep. Back to you, Philip. You mentioned that when you got into the business, you were developing your own printer, and at some point decided that going to commercial printer producers was the way to go. Have you been happy with what you've been able to achieve? Or are you still thinking there's more there that isn't developed, that you still need to see developed in the 3D printing technology itself?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're obviously, happy with what I think the progress I think that's been made.
Yep.
From where we were, right? I mean, we were buying essentially all the parts, separately, and kind of building the printers, right? So it's going
Mhm.
out, getting extruded from one place, getting software, like all of these different kind of components to build the printers, right? You're figuring out kind of a makeshift kind of enclosure. And I think what we
Mhm.
did, it worked, it worked well for what we were doing. I think just to prove the model out that you could do this. And I think that was what was really I think strong. And I think that's what you kind of do when you're building, a small kind of scrappy, kind of startup. Um, but eventually we had to evolve, right? You had to have that level of consistency that if you were going to be doing, more than just one or two items, if all of a sudden, which we do, we now get orders for 50, 100, 100, couple hundred, your pieces of furniture. And so when you're doing that, you want to make sure that you actually have that consistency. And if you have three different, printers that you've kind of made that with different parts, they're not going to necessarily have, I think, that same level of tooling and engineering that we were able to get from Rahul and his team.
Yep. Was there an element as far as scaling up went there, as well? So, obviously, you're talking about consistency, but I would think, would have been equally difficult to just produce the number of printers as you grow the business that you would need.
Well, I mean, the challenge where that lies is that it's getting all, sometimes it's actually because we were also trying to do everything as cheaply as possible. So sometimes where you're getting your extruders from, it's
Yep.
it's
Yep.
not always necessarily the top of the line and kind of the best. And sometimes that company may go out of business. So it's like you always want to have, I think, that you don't necessarily get that consistency when you're doing everything. I think. On a kind of a bare minimum, I think, budget. Also, I think that requires too that you have a team that can also build those, but then also
Mhm.
do all the kind of production and handle kind of both things. And I think that was something that I think we had to kind of look at and say, like, where do we want to lean in here, and where do we
Yep.
want to put our resources? Um,
Yep.
I think where the future kind of goes and what our expectations are is that, yeah, we want more, right? I mean, we're constantly, and I know that 3D Systems is also at the same time for them
Mhm.
to kind of grow. They're having to make sure that that there's I know a new printer that just kind of rolled out, that has different kind of capabilities, different price points. So as we think about even our kind of um, capex kind of moving forward and the things that we need, yeah, we're absolutely thrilled that 3D Systems is looking at your new technology, and we want that to print faster, and we want to be able to print more things at one time, and reduce our labor costs and things like that. So love where I think the industry is going, and the direction of things. So pleased, yes, but obviously there's always more that we want, that are going to make that's going to make my business and I think 3D printing businesses more efficient.
Yep. Rahul, thinking about what Philip just said, I mean, clearly part of your business is gathering that kind of feedback from your customers. How much does that drive your R&D efforts and your direction that you're looking at for the future of 3D printing?
Absolutely, I would say 100%, right? We don't execute on any new R&D project unless we have our trusted customers like Philip and some other ones who are asking for it, or we go do a market research and try to understand what could be the next thing that we should be working on. But I think, again, that's the fallacy of any new product development, right? You can create a product, but there is no customer, then you just wasted a lot of resources on developing something new. And so I think we're constantly working with our customers, understanding how can we continue to create more value for their business so that they can create more value for their customers, right? And so that's when we take that into account. I still remember Philip asking me a couple of years ago, hey, it will be, our machines are big. If you remember seeing our current existing products are big, right? They print cubic meter parts. And then he was asking, hey, do you have something which is smaller? Because he has some other furniture parts that are smaller in size. And of course, he's looking at distributed manufacturing, so the capital expenses become important. And that's when, if we can create something which has a smaller footprint with same capabilities because it's working, but then with a lower price point, right, to reduce the barrier to the entry. And one of the Philic has been one of the trusted partners who have been giving us that feedback, and so we have taken that into account. And recently at Rapid North America trade show in June, we launched a new EXT printer.
Excellent. Back to you, Phillip. As you look at, kind of the future and your corporate value of doing things in an environmentally friendly way, where are the next big opportunities for whether it's waste reduction or material use, reuse, or recycling?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of different areas. I mean, one is, today, most of our business has been through, like I said, we've kind of shifted. At one point, when the company first started, we were looking at, kind of more of a direct-to-consumer model. We've shifted the business more to, commercial-based, and a lot of our business comes out of, like I said, the workplace and hospitality sectors. We do a little bit in education and even in healthcare. But as we start to kind of do things, what we're recognizing is now, as we're starting to have the ability to scale and putting out a product, I think that is very well received and recognized, we're seeing that retailers are coming to us. So now we're doing contract manufacturing for large retail furniture companies, and starting to build on larger scale partnerships. Where I think people are Rahul mentioned early on that a lot of these companies looked at this 3D printing as just purely as prototypes. But now I think as we start to kind of prove the model out and show that from a design perspective that there is demand for it and that there is desirability around the product, that we can start to do this. So I think the hope, long term, is that if we can start to then bring these processes, like Rahul said, you're never. I don't think in the near term we're going to replace, kind of the way that whether it's injection molding or other forms of kind of high speed manufacturing. What you're going to do is you're going to augment it, and I think that that's what our hope is right, is we can start to bring like these practices and start to kind of chip away at things, and then you're putting a better product out there where there's kind of zero waste. There's no toxicity within kind of our elements. If you come in, if you looked at our shop, you'd be just almost kind of like taken back by like just how clean and how at a large commercial manufacturer from Europe that was touring our facility, and he was just like, this is like the most pristine like manufacturing shop I've ever seen, right? Because it's just, you're just printers, right? I mean, that are enclosed, and so you're doing things in a way that I think promotes safety for your employees, ultimately putting a product out there that is going to be safe and environmentally friendly to, I think, the consumer. And so I think the more that we can continue to do that and promote that and get others to kind of adopt that within the industry and start working with us, that's what really excites me, and that's where we're headed.
Excellent. And really, same question to you, Rahul, as you look at the 3D printing business, what are the opportunities that you see to reduce waste and make things more environmentally friendly?
Absolutely. I think, especially with the extrusion business, right, we're dealing with thermoplastic materials. So think about, you can use the traditional recycling approach that people use for thermoplastic material, where, it could be a furniture, it could be a tool, sand casting tool or thermoforming tool or whatever it is. And then you should be able to regrind it, and as long you can put it back into the same form, pellet form, which is what a lot of the recycling companies do, and then you should be able to process it back again through the extrusion line, right? So I think that's a huge advantage when you're processing thermoplastic materials. There is a closed loop that you can get into, and then on top of that, you're really printing that whatever you just need. So you're not doing any machining operation where you're removing things, right? And so you're creating less waste, as Phillip said. So I think there's a lot of emphasis, and with these new technologies, I think everybody has to think about how can we create a closed loop cycle for everyone in the value chain.
Yeah, one thing I do want to also add to that too is, and I didn't touch on it, kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, was just the fact is that we're also seeing a lot of development in kind of material science side of things. We started purely using PLA, so we don't use any petroleum-based products. But at the same time, as we were looking at outdoor furniture, PLA doesn't have that high of a heat tolerance. And so we needed to have something that was different. So as we started going out and exploring, we found that there was, the development of the psyllium acetate, which is about a 93-94% biodegradable material made from wood pulp and cotton fiber. It's been traditionally used in eyewear and other kind of safety goggle material, but now all of a sudden you can start to 3D print with it, much higher heat tolerance. And I think the idea is that it breaks down, so if it ends up in submerged in water or in landfill or in soil, right, it's ultimately just the product will break down. And I think something like that is that our goal is to be able to do take back programs where we can bring the products back after a client is maybe if they're doing a remodel or renovation or what have you. But ultimately, we too feel like by putting a product out there that is going to, break down over time, over a much shorter period of time, right? Than a petroleum-based plastic. That's how we're also thinking about things from an environmental standpoint. So I think that's really important to us in getting people adopting, but then also pushing, as you mentioned earlier, kind of pushing your vendors and your partners to also develop other things. And we're starting to see a lot more, I think, development in the material science side. We're also working with company called R Carbon that sequesters carbon, and we use that in all of our black pigments. So again, working with I think a lot of just amazing companies that are well ahead of I think their time.
Yeah, that material science point is an excellent one, and one I don't think a lot of people connect with sustainability. So great point you made there. We are just about out of time, so just wanted to toss to each of you for final thoughts. Rahul first.
Again, thank you so much for having me on this show. Really appreciate that, and I think it's great to have Phillip also on the show and to demonstrate the power of different players in the value chain when they work together, right? How much new products, innovation that can happen and then create new value for the customer. So I think it's been a great partnership working with Phillip. Again, as I think we're still scratching the surface in terms of the extrusion-based 3D printing. There's a lot that is going to happen over the next years, right? Not only on the hardware, software, materials, but also on the application side. And I think, again, we're just excited to be part of this journey. Thank you.
Thank you. And Phillip.
Yeah, Jim, again, thanks for the opportunity, to talk today, and obviously really valued, partnership with Rahul and the team at 3D Systems. What I guess I would say, to anyone listening, is that, look, I'm still very much a novice in this area. I think sometimes it helps me because I don't necessarily always know what I'm doing, and I think I can throw ideas out there that sometimes challenge the team, and they kind of look at me like, well, I don't know if we can do that. I'm like, well, try, let's see. But I think the other thing too is that, I think a lot of the progress we've made, again, is because people have come to us with ideas, right? And, like I said, on the material science side, I think both the hardware and then the software capabilities is that, it ultimately we're made stronger, I think, by partnerships and by people coming to us and asking us what we're capable of and what we're not capable of. And sometimes we lean in to when we're not and say, well, that's a really good idea. If we can kind of crack that nut, that would be pretty amazing. And so I think as we continue to move the business forward, I think, I'm just excited to understand what is out there, where we can continue to kind of get better and where we can, find, I think really strong strategic partnerships and be challenged in the things that we do. Because, I think we like to try to push boundaries, but at the same time, I also know that like I said, we're only as good as those out there kind of, pushing us and working with us to do so.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you both. This was really cool. What I love about this is, I'm an old mechanical engineering geek, manufacturing guy my whole career. And I just love people doing new things in any way. But, what you two brought is this whole business model of doing things better by using the latest in technology and really even challenging the latest in technology. So just a phenomenal story. Plus, as I said at the front end, you make really cool looking stuff.
Well, thank you.
Thanks to you both.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks,
and as always, thanks to all of you out there. You are why we're here. And, I can't promise every story is going to be as cool as the one that Phillip and Rahul brought us today. but they're always at least a little cool. And we're here every Tuesday, so tune in. In the meantime, if you have any questions about this stuff, throw them in the comments. As always, like, share, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for Manufacturing Talks. So long.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Benoski. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.